Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This past couple of weeks, we've really seen a jet stream pattern both in the North Pacific and in the North Atlantic that's remained relatively unblocked. That's been quite uncharacteristic given what we've seen since the beginning of this year, but the jet stream's kind of open and flowing, and as you see here as it resets, no big areas of like stagnant high pressure, no higher of a low patterns, no Rex blocks, no Omega blocks. The flow's going. So the big questions we're going to have is that going to change? Are we going to go back to what we saw maybe in early March or back into February? And what's ultimately kind of controlling this pattern? Now, of course, we've had a lot of severe weather just here in the last 24 hours. And looking at the Storm Prediction Center data here, this is the report data, we can see that last night we had over almost 300 reports of severe weather. And a lot of this came on a really elongated squall line that had embedded supercells, and it produced 37 tornado reports in total here. And just thinking about this and then thinking how things have changed today as we're watching severe weather go through parts of the Northeast and also some strong storms still cutting through parts of Florida today, this has got me thinking a lot about historically what happens when you get into April. And if we notice here, this is our tornado counts so far in the year, and we're well above average now. In fact, there's only a few years that have had more tornadoes through this point in March, we're going back to 2005. And one of the years I'm really kind of keying in on is this one right here. Okay, there's a year that we really just took off in tornado reports throughout the month of April. And of course, that's 2011. 2011 not only had the massive outbreak, the biggest in U.S. history that happened at the end of the month, but don't forget at the beginning of the month, we saw a jet stream pattern that really just favored wide open flow that ran up over a ridge that was parked here just off the coast. And if you'd like to think about a pattern that is the most conducive to severe weather east of the Rocky Mountains, it's this pattern. By the way, this same pattern also delivers a lot of late season precipitation to the west. So we think about April 2011 as being one of those months where the whole country was active, given that the jet stream pattern was so far to the south, producing repeated shortwaves that ejected out of the plains. Now, we remember the big outbreak that happened in the southeast toward the end of the month, but don't forget the beginning of that month started off active as well. And on April 4th, 2011, we set the record for the most severe weather reports in a single day at nearly 1,500. So this was an incredible month, to say the least, the busiest in U.S. history in terms of severe weather reports. Now, on the flip side of that, I can take you back to 2018. And that was the year where there was ridging here over Southern California. So the flow came over the top and then dove into the United States. And the ridge that in 2011 hugged the coast was way out over the open Atlantic. And the net effect was to bring repeated shots of very, very cold air across much of the Midwest, the Corn Belt, the East. In fact, this is what the precipitation ranks, the temperature ranks, look like by the time we finished April 2018. So we can kind of see two different patterns. And the question is, what are we going to see this April? Are we going to get some form of one of those two patterns? And most of those are going to be born on what the jet stream's doing in the Pacific. And that's the case we're going to try to make here as we understand what we're going to see here for April 2022. Now, the unique thing about April 2022 is this. This was just released this morning. It's the latest drought monitor. We still have about 70% of the United States in some form of drought. And when you compare back to 2018 or 2011, the picture looks entirely different when you look at this year. So we have seen some drought improvement. Of course, it's been down here where the heaviest rains have been as of late. But coming back into Texas and the high plains and stretching back up into Montana, and it's continued to get worse throughout the west, despite bringing in some much-needed precipitation into California with this most recent system. Now, as I think about all of this, I'm going to tell you the story is starting to move away from the tropics temporarily. You know that for the last several months, I've been telling you a lot about what's going on with La Niña and its relationship with the MJO. And I want to take a break from that because I think what's happening now is we're seeing a whole lot more of the setup of this pattern happening here from the Himalayas through Japan and the open Pacific. And this is what I'm talking about. The color coding here shows you jet stream level winds. And what we got right now is this broad trough. See it coming across the United States here. And this is what's pushing the severe weather into the east. Now, as I play this forward, what I want you to see is as we get out there through the weekend and into early next week, the jet stream develops something we've not seen a lot of this year. And that is this subtropical branch right here. It's missing California. That would be ideal if we could get it to hit California, but it's missing California. But it's born out of Hawaii, and it's moving over the Baja and eventually coming to Texas. And that means next week on the 4th, 5th, and 6th, that subtropical jet, on the nose of it, we're going to be seeing another round of severe weather for the south. But what's interesting is after that, pay attention to what the jet stream's doing along the west coast, building up into a large ridge by the 7th, which then dives into a trough that's going to exit east. So this will mean cooler weather east, but also a much more calmer go of it from probably the 7th or 6th or 7th out there to maybe even as far as the 10th, 11th, or 12th. And this is why. You see, the jet stream, if it pushes that larger ridge and sends its fastest winds pretty far to the south over Florida, it's a much calmer pattern for the U.S., and what we're going to have to watch for is any shift in that ridge by the time we get out there to the 10th, 11th, or 12th. And this is what we're starting to see. Once the ridge was here next week, the ridge is going to be there next week, and it's going to start to shift back out here again. And if that occurs, the jet stream flow is going to ignite again over the mountains, and probably after the 12th into the 13th, 14th, 15th, we're going to see better flow across, from the southern plains into the mid-south again. Now, what are we trying to say here? What I'm trying to say here is that La Niña, which has kept giving us these big surges of trade winds as of late, seems to have backed off from doing that. If I look right now at the behavior of the MJO, it's kind of fallen into just squarely in the middle of null space. And I could make an argument that I don't think it is really going to pop out into the Western Pacific. I think it's going to spend a whole lot more time here in null space. That's where we're focusing more on those jet stream level winds as they're being borne off of Asia coming across the open Pacific Ocean. Because even when I look out there at the velocity potentials, we kind of see that the MJO is sitting over phase 4, 5, 6. And you come down here and say, well, there are still some stronger trade winds kind of nudging this way and this way. But overall, I'm not seeing the MJO moving away from its current position. It's being complicated by the fact there are a couple of tropical systems that could be emerging northwest of Australia going toward the Philippines. And that's going to mess with the MJO signal and really kind of give us a pretty convoluted signal overall. So what I want to do is I want to take this idea of the motion of the Pacific jet stream and show you the latest update here from the European model. Now what it has done is it's backed away from the really dry conditions it had been showing for the plains. What's the time period we're looking at here? Mid-April to mid-May. It appears that we're going to be seeing very tight planting windows in this area, all the way from the lower Mississippi River Valley through the eastern Corn Belt into the northeast. If we could return better moisture here, this would be welcomed going into the season because the Canadian prairie, still in drought, needs this moisture. We are flooding on the Red River Valley of the North due to snowpack melt, but more moisture in this area at this time of year is also welcome because we typically don't get to our last frost dates until we get into May anyway, so getting that moisture in place there. But this has been the most aggressive model run I've seen on keeping this area very active with respect to strong storms and severe weather. And I don't see a scenario right now, based upon the jet stream behavior, that we don't have a very active time period here of strong to severe storms throughout the month of April. It's just not showing up right now. There's no indication of that. I am not predicting a repeat of 2011, but I am not seeing a situation like we had in 2018. I think it's going to be a year that's going to see a lot of thunderstorm activity and very wet conditions in through this area. And there's good support from that from other models, but that's what we're seeing at this particular juncture. So that's my newest update as we stretch out there from mid-April to mid-May. We'll look at the temperatures in a few moments, but it's going to be this area that's going to see very, very tight windows going forward. If there's a positive, it beats back the drought that is in parts of this area, but that's all going to be benefit we'll find later on in the season. Okay, there is one fear, and the fear is to see the ridge redevelop here. That's the thing we have to be on the lookout for. And how that would happen is if the MJO, let's go back to it here, instead of coming out, let's try this, instead of staying here, maybe going back to the Western Pacific, if it comes back out in the Indian Ocean again, we are going to go right back over to this pattern. And none of us want to see that, because what that does is that robs the West of any late season moisture, that puts convergence in the jet stream in the midsection of the country, and it's drier, and systems eject here. And as a result, it's cold throughout the Midwest. It's cold in New England. It's cold at times into the Southeast. This is the pattern we do not want to see repeat. And what I would tell you is we've got to get another big surge in trade winds to push the MJO back over to the Indian Ocean in order for that to occur. That's it. That's what we have to be on the lookout for. Okay, just looking back at the last 72 hours, though, in addition to all that severe weather, we put down a lot of very heavy rainfall in places. And we are also noticing some of the reports today, how much snow we got back in the West. Now, this was needed. Whoops, right in through here. Desperately needed to see this because any moisture is good moisture in South Dakota right now, given how dry it's been since the start of the year. Same thing for parts of Nebraska, western Nebraska. Needed this snowpack in this area. I know we don't want to be cold, but that's the case. Conditions through Iowa. In fact, we saw snow today where I live in Illinois, kind of a bummer, but to the east, this is where we were seeing some of the severe weather take shape today. So strong storms down south, live lightning data here as of, it's almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see the storms ripping through parts of central Florida, and this is going to be the line we're going to watch later this afternoon or this evening. Storm Prediction Center's been eyeing that. It's got it up to an enhanced risk there. Let's go ahead and flip on over to the high-res NAM model to see how this progresses. So 5 o'clock this evening, we were watching these storms and the little snow and sleet squalls on the back side of this low. Those storms moved pretty quickly to the east in the overnight hours, as you can see here, while the snow squalls kind of continue to gather in parts of the eastern Corn Belt. This low has been with us, by the way, since the beginning of the week. That's how long it's taken to get into New England, where they're going to see some snow showers. Now, following that, there are actually two separate waves, one coming through almost like Winnipeg here, and another one coming out between Nebraska, Kansas, that area. What you're going to see is it could return a bit more moisture to Omaha, Lincoln, places that need it, western Iowa. Very dry in this area, so I like to see this. Could get some scattered storms to the south Friday night into Saturday. And that little system squeaks right through the border between Missouri and Iowa, comes across Illinois, making another soggy day here in Illinois. Some places here just picked up over 2 inches of rainfall. Could get a little snow farther to the north on this. Now that system plays into the eastern part of the U.S., but to see where this goes, I got to flip over to the European model and also the GFS. Would like to point out, though, that once again we have some separation in the model performance, with the European kind of going back up on top here with the better skill score, matching the 500 millibar pattern than the GFS is currently. But I like to look at both of them. So we're going to pick this up here on Sunday morning, where that low that went across Illinois is now sitting here, Pennsylvania, New York. It's in both models. And there's a second system right behind it. You see it right there, a little shortwave coming out of Montana into the Dakotas. Again, any moisture in this area is a benefit. Now, if you remember what I told you, we're going to be seeing on the 4th and 5th the nose of a much stronger branch of the subtropical jet stream coming into Texas. And what you're going to see is that going from Sunday into Monday, and now Monday into Tuesday, that's when it starts to show up. Now, there is risk in this area Monday night through the day on Tuesday of seeing severe storms, and it is in both models. But there's a second component to this, because there's another system, see it here in the GFS and over here in the European, that's plowing into the Pacific Northwest, really cranking up coastal precipitation. And notice this, the models are attempting to develop another broad trough in this area, possibly bringing some precipitation back to the very dry regions of Montana. The bad part about this is all day long, the model runs have continued to get drier in Montana, and that is one area that is in deep, deep drought right now. Well, what we notice here is that by the time we plow through Tuesday into Wednesday, the southern branch of that system pushes over into the eastern part of the United States. And so again, I'm going to be watching Monday through Wednesday, an area in through here that could see strong to severe storms. But the northern part of this is well, we just have different views of it from the European versus the GFS. See how the European keeps the two systems separated? The GFS tries to blend them together into one larger system as we get out to Wednesday. And so you can see the difference here is that the GFS, putting them together, shoves them much more quickly into New England by next Friday, whereas the European leaves a deeper trough lingering with cold air once again over the eastern Corn Belt. And a lot of folks in here, of course, do not want to hear that. But given that the Europeans had better performance, let's just watch it again here. Keep your eye over here on the left-hand side. Here's the first wave coming out with the severe weather threat. The second upper level trough digging in here into the upper Midwest and just slowly moving into New England as we look out there. Pretty far in the forecast, all the way out to April 9th. I do want to point out that our severe thunderstorm environment index for next Tuesday is really starting to show up in an area here. So let's watch this all weekend to see if that trend continues as the nose of that jet punches into this area, okay? From there, I would like just to show you total accumulated precip. So these are the storms tonight. We can see the weak system that rolls through here on Saturday into Sunday. And then what you're going to watch is the next system taking off next Tuesday, Wednesday to the south. And then the bigger system, see it curling up right here, that comes out next Wednesday, Thursday. So if I just take us out here about a week in the forecast, you know, there is moisture returning to the northern plains. So it's something, but to be less than a ½ inch isn't much. This will continue to eat away at the drought that's been in parts of the Western Corn Belt and the Great Lakes states, but we're not yet delivering enough moisture to the back side of this where we have the high plains here. We've got to get the jet stream to ridge here and then dive over the Four Corner states in order for that to occur. Now, thinking out here about what we saw in the month of March, I'm just happy to see more moisture coming into this area given how dry that it's been. But we've really worked hard on eliminating drought in this area. These next few systems will likely continue to push back on the drought. I wouldn't call it drought development, but the drier conditions we've seen in this area as well. But California, no strong subtropical jet that gets far enough to the north here, and into this area to really help alleviate the drought situation. So seeing about 30% of normal snowpack here and 40% in the southern Sierra, this is just putting us in a pretty rough situation going into the 2022 dry season for the West. From here, I would like to show you what the pattern's going to do, though. Take a look. This is the ridge that forms in the west, bringing in all the warmth and the dry conditions April 9th. It's the same thing that calms the pattern down after this trough exits, and that's the one that sits over the Eastern Corn Belt, making things cold about a week from right now. But, as I told you, the pattern is open and unblocked. That's what we covered at the beginning. So watch, as we go out here to the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. See what it did? Push the ridge back to the Gulf of Alaska. Here comes a trough. These will eject, and that means that this whole area is going to go over very active. Now that's at the end of week 2, out here the 12th, 13th, 14th. I'm telling you, we need to watch carefully for the severe weather threat in these areas as this pattern takes shape. And yep, it'll go over cold again in the northwest and northern plains. The models haven't fully resolved it yet. Okay, they just haven't. But I'm just going to make a case that this area, getting out there past the 12th, so the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, is going to go over very active once again, tightening up those windows and shutting down a lot of field work, unfortunately. Now, temperature side of this. We do expect everywhere that you see in gray here to have a frost over the next 7 days. So we're still getting that frost line pretty far to the south here. But let's take a look at what the high temperatures are going to do and compare them to average. So we already saw these today. This is how things shape up tomorrow. So Friday pulling that cooler air into New England. Then as we go into Saturday, again, this is well forecast about 2 weeks ago, keeping this area on the cooler side of things. But there's warmth coming back to the west. There's warmth in the high plains, and that warmth spreads east into the central plains on Sunday. Going now into Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. That's that next big trough ticking down. But remember, it's after this. Okay, this is the 6th. This is when we see the nose of the jet coming through, increasing the severe weather threat here. After this is when the ridge shows back up, and that's when we go back over into a warmer time period in the west. Start to see that here? We're cooler for a while, going into about day 8 through 10 in the Eastern Corn Belt. But remember, the whole pattern flips itself again, and now we see a mid-month warm-up in the midsection of the country. I believe this temperature pattern for the month of April is going to be volatile. It's going to move a lot. And you say, why? I don't see anything blocking up the Pacific jet. The only thing missing is any sense of a subtropical jet stream pattern going into California. So when you look at this temperature pattern from mid-May to mid-April, it's not going to convey what's really going to happen. It's just not. This is not how things are going to shape up. So I don't even want to consider it at this point. So let's just take all of this and move it into the southern hemisphere because there's a story brewing there as well. We've seen over the last month very dry conditions showing up in Brazil's eastern growing areas, and about 20% of the Safrinha crop is grown here. But I'd like to show you this. Mato Grosso, as of late, when we think about their corn producing area, has started to see a little bit of a drying trend. There's been plenty of moisture, but it's been drier than average. It's east of here where the problems have been, like in Minas Gerais. Very wet in February, But then once we entered March, they've almost flatlined, and it's been quite dry as of late, which means the Safrinha crop grown there, and again, that is this state right here, has missed out on a lot of precipitation. Let's go look at Goiás, which is there. Goiás, again, we grow quite a bit of Safrinha corn there, and they have gone over dry as well. So we need to be paying attention to these shifts that are happening because they're starting to impact the crops there. Meanwhile, down in southern Brazil, like the state of Paraná, they've actually gone back up above average after being in pretty severe drought earlier in the season. So that's a recap. Where we're going is here. I've been not surprised, but given the MJO behavior, it's pretty amazing to see that this large section where we grow, this is about 80% of the Safrinha corn, is going to see a much drier than average next 10 to 15 days. And that could have an impact on this Safrinha corn crop here to the north. Meanwhile, we're still seeing flooding rains down south in eastern Paraguay, southern Brazil, and those are areas that early in the season were deep in drought. Argentina, the models have kind of flip-flopped each forecast with the precipitation pattern here, so we're not getting strong signals out of Argentina. But it's this right here we need to watch to see if that continues, because once we start the month of May, that would be the end of the monsoon anyway. So we could finish on very dry conditions here, which has been a concern of ours for a while. All right, that's it for today. Have a good rest of your week and weekend. I'll watch these trends over the weekend. We'll be back to you again on Monday. Thanks.